Well, good everyone, it's Graham from Great Off-Road Adventures. Welcome back to another video. Now in this one here, we're going to look at how to change the CV on your car. I'm doing it in the comfort of my own backyard, and I do have a couple extra tools with me today, but the principle is the same. I've done this a couple of times. I've done it a couple of times at home, fortunately. I have snapped the CV out in the bush. I did not have my spare with me at that time, but I've got all the tools in the car that I need to be able to do this out in the bush. So this is a quick guide tutorial, let's say, on how to change your CV, whether you're at home or you're out in the bush. From the tough tracks to the remote tracks, from our campsites to the workshops. Come along and check out Great Off-Road Adventures. Your next episode is just seconds away. Nice. So let's get into a couple tools that you definitely need to get this job done, and then let's get into it. All right, so obviously if you're going to change your CV, the first thing you're going to need is a replacement CV. The really good thing about 200 series is that the CV shafts left to right are identical. So I just carry one spare shaft with me when I go out in the bush, and I can use it on the passenger side or the driver's side, being that they're identical. A lot of other cars out there, they are specific passenger driver side shafts, so then you inevitably have to carry two. The other really important tool that you need is for the 200 series. This is a 39mm 12-point socket, and you need this to get the nut off the end of the CV shaft to be able to change it. And then beyond that, what I've got to get that nut off, and I carry this one in the car, this is a big breaker bar. It extends out, as you can see, and basically that CV nut on the car is done up to about 300 Newton meters and requires a lot of force to be able to undo it, and obviously also get it tight enough again. I do have a torque wrench, and then beyond that I've just got an assortment of impact sockets, another socket set, a hammer, a few pry bars. As I go through doing it, I'll explain to you what I'm doing as we go. So let's get into it. Obviously the first thing we need to do is we need to get the car up in the air. What I've done, I've already got the car in the air, as you can see. Use my trolley jack. Being that I'm at home, I've got that creature comfort and a bit more safety. And I've also got it resting on a big jack stand as well. That's on the chassis. So all the weight's off of this tyre. And as you can see, the suspension is dripped down. So what I'll do now, knock the wheel nuts off, get tyre off, and we'll get into changing over the CV shaft. I think it's pretty self-explanatory on how to remove a wheel from the car. If you don't know how to do that, then do not proceed any further with this job of trying to change your CV shaft. That's my little disclaimer. Now let's kick on with what you have to do next. Once you've removed your wheel, you need to remove the dust cover that covers either the axle nut or CV shaft nut, whatever you call it. Here I'm just using a flat bladed screwdriver and a rubber mallet along with a small pry bar just to pop that off. From there you've got a split pin or a cotter pin, depending what part of the world you're in. It has a different name, but as you can see, set of pliers and straighten that pin out, and then you can just knock it out the way. Get myself a set of gloves because it's starting to get greasy and dirty now. Set of pliers and the rubber mallet, and I'll just gently sort of knock that pin out, as you can see I do here. All right, so what you've seen us do there is take the tyre off, take the dust cap off, take the cotter pin or split pin out, and take the little castle protector, whatever, just off of the end there. So now, as you can see, we've got the big CV nut or that we've got to take off. So basically at this point here, this is where the job becomes a bit frustrating, or you need a second person. So in my case, I'm going to get Jess to help me because I'm at home, and if I was in the bush, I'd get her to help me too. But basically, we have to undo this nut. Now, Like I said, it's about 300 newton meters. It's a lot of force. If I was on my own, I'd end up putting the tyre back on the car, bolting it on with the dust cover off, and then dropping the car back down on the ground using the friction of the tyre on the ground to crack that nut. Alternatively, because we are at home, I'm going to get Jess to jump in the car, put her foot on the brakes hard, and I'm going to undo the nut that way. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just the only really tricky part of the job where you need two people basically. Okay. Right, so in order to get the CV shaft out, I've obviously loosened off that nut, you can see. We have to actually either knock the upper ball joint loose or the lower ball joint. On the 200 series, luckily, there's actually a little mounting plate that holds the lower ball joint, and then that bolts into the bottom of the upright or the hub assembly, whatever you want to call it. So basically what I'm going to do, what I've done in the past, is I'm actually going to take those two bolts out, about 22 or 24 mil bolts, and then that'll actually allow me to lift the hub assembly or the upright assembly up and then maneuver the CV out. So I've left the CV nut on for now, just so that it still all sort of holds itself together, and then basically I'll take those bottom two bolts out, and yeah, we'll get into it. So we're looking at taking that one out and that one there out. So that's your lower ball joint, and then you've got these two bolts either side of it. That's what we're going to take out, separate it. Even though it's a 1/2 inch rattle gun, it doesn't actually have enough grunt to undo these bolts on its own, hence the need to loosen them off with the pry bar to begin with. Alright, so what I've gotten prepared now is to hold this hub assembly up out of the way. I've just got a ratchet strap up over the guard and onto a fairly sturdy bracket in the engine bay. So basically I've taken those two bolts out the bottom. What I can do now is you can see there the hub assembly can move around. So what I'll do now is I'll lift that up a little bit. I'll still leave this CV nut on right now until I'm actually ready to take it off the end. So yeah, I'll just lift this up, just take a little weight off of it, try and bring that CV shaft into a straight alignment. That'll give me the best orientation then to manipulate it and get it out. Because we've undone those bolts at the bottom, you do need to be mindful of your tension for your ABS wiring and your brake line, okay? You can, if you want to, take the caliper off, suspend it over the back there, take the ABS sensor out, or take the bracket off to give you a bit more tension, a bit less tension on the ABS wiring, but I've never done that. I've never had any issues, so shouldn't be too much problem. So what I'll do, I'll just leave that there, my rubber mallet, just break that sort of bind on the axle end there. Now let's lift this up. Hopefully my strap is strong enough. There you go, you can see there what we've achieved. That's basically all we need to do. Not super confident in my strap. I feel like it might be loosening off. But we'll see how we go. Can't go too far. So this point here, take this nut all the way out. You can see there, no issues getting the CV shaft out of the hub. All right, so what you can see is, if you just go back a little bit, so that's where my head is. So you can see I've got the axle end of the CV shaft out that goes through the hub, And so now the shaft's just held in there. You can see it's split here. This is why I'm changing it. There's nothing actually wrong with it. It's not broken or anything, but that boot split. That's a boot from a previous rebuild. So I'll get it rebuilt again. So what I've got to do now is knock this CV out. It is a bit of a difficult job. Looks like it's going to end up having to take the bash plate off. I was hoping not, but we'll see how we go. Yep. All right, this is the importance of safety, guys. If you're doing this out in the bush and you only have a jack, make sure that you've got your tyre or something under your car as well. Perhaps try and find a log or a stump or something that you can put under there, and also support the car in case it moves. I'm pretty confident. I've got a 5,000 kilo axle stand immediately under the chassis behind me, and that's solid. And I've also got the jack under the front as well, just in contact with the chassis. So I'm pretty confident. The car certainly hasn't moved at all whilst we've been taking off the CV nut and doing that heavy stuff. All I got to do now is just go under there and just knock the CV out from the diff. It has a little circlip on the end of it that sits inside the diff. So basically just got to knock that out, and then we can take the CV out. This is a bit of a dirty job, as you can see. Myself and my mechanic cover the car in anti-seize all the time. So yeah, hence why I got the gloves. Jess is lovingly doing the camera work for me. Otherwise I'd be forever cleaning my hands, moving the camera, cleaning my hands, moving the camera. I do have an oil drip tray, being that I'm at home, because this is the side that does go immediately into the diff, and depending on the orientation of the car, that sort of thing, could have a little bit of oil just drain out the diff. So we'll see how we go. If that's the case, I'll try and catch it as best as I can with the drip tray. Anyway, let's get to it.
You want to go from the angle, or?
Fortunately for me, I was actually able to find a little slot in the bash plate that would allow me to put my pry bar through and engage on the little groove on the inner CV cup. I was started out using the rubber mallet. I do not recommend that. The rubber absorbs the impact and it doesn't actually get you to pop out the locking clip or the circlip of the CV that sits inside the diff. You need to use a metal hammer. For me, I used a little gimpy with my pry bar, and on about second strike managed to knock the circlip out and obviously dislodge the CV from inside the diff. So as you can see, we are getting some oil draining out, which is why I've got the thing there. All right, so new shaft's ready to go, rebuilt. You've got to be particularly careful that you don't like extend it longitudinally and pull the joints apart. So this is the end that goes in the diff. This is the circlip I was talking about having to knock out. And basically that one, I've got circlip dislodged. So I'm going to take it out and then I'm going to put this in. I'm going to try and do that pretty quickly so that minimize the amount of oil that comes out. And I've got a rag ready to put around the end of the one that's coming out. If you can see what I'm doing there with my hand, I'm trying to support the inner CV cup when I take it out of the diff, and vice versa when I put the new CV back in the diff. I support that inner CV cup to ensure that the splines and the circlip do not damage the inner axle seal, which is the rubber seal that holds the oil in the diff. If you damage that seal, then you'll get a leak, and that's obviously an additional repair that needs to be undertaken then. Here we go. Did you get that?
I heard the noise.
All right, so there you go. That's the bit that needs to be done with a little bit of haste. So basically, I went away from using the rubber mallet to a metal hammer. The rubber mallet was just absorbing the impact that I needed. Just use a little pry bar just to get on the lip. I'll show you what lip I'm talking about. So this little lip here in the CV. So basically that sits inside the diff, on an angle like that, and I just got the pry bar in, hit the end of it enough to dislodge the circlip, and then I can just pull it out like I've done. Obviously, you might have seen what I was talking about with hyperextending the joint, like that. Now that CV joint's all sort of, I know the alignment of it, so I can put it back together, but if I pulled that out, twisted it, now it won't go back together. See, it's stuck. So you got to be particularly careful with your new one. You don't want to do that because you can really stuff up the alignment and damage the boot and all that. Obviously, this is my buggered one, so I don't mind showing it to you. What a shitty job. Delightful. Grease and junk everywhere. So that one there, now what I'll do is I'll whack that straight in the box, and I'll take that down with a set of boots and rebuild kit, and I'll get it rebuilt, and it'll become a spare again. Now that we've got that joint end of the CV shaft back in the diff, and you would have seen I used the pry bar and the hammer just to knock that circlip in. That's sitting in there properly. Basically reverse the procedure to put it back together. So what I'll do now is, without hyperextending the joints, basically I'll bring the CV up straight. I'll push it in so it's as short as I can, manipulate the hub, bring the outside end of the CV shaft through the hub here. I'm not going to worry about greasing everything because my mechanic Jason literally, what was it, a week ago, went over everything here, just put in new pads, new front wheel bearings and all that. And as you can see, there's anti-seize and whatnot and everything. So I'm just going to leave that in situ. Because yeah, it all looks perfectly fine. If I hadn't been going over recently, I'd put all my own anti-seize on it. There you go. Hopefully you can see that. I'll just get that on there loosely. And now that that's on there, everything's aligned, nothing's going to come out. I'll be able to take the weight of the hub. You're not even pointing that at me. Can you see me?
He's pointing at you. Don't doubt my camera work.
So basically what I'll do now is I'll take the weight of the hub and I'll loosen off my strap and I'll swing it down and I'll work to align the lower ball joint back onto the lower control arm. So they're the two big bolts. They're a 22mm socket, FYI. It goes without saying with most things mechanical, don't force anything because you just end up doing damage. So when it gets to locating these bolts again, take your time, ensure they're lined up correctly so you don't cross thread them or do any damage. And I'll show you what I mean by that now. So the reason why it won't align, I'm looking down the bottom here. I think you can sort of see that. See how the top is not aligned with the bottom. So basically I either tilt the bottom up to match it like that, or I lower the tension off of the strap. So you can see there, that's why the bolts won't grab in the threads, because they're not aligned with each other. So I spent a little bit of time fluffing around just getting the alignment there perfect so I could get those bolts in through the knuckle into the hub or lower control arm without any issues. And obviously once they're in there, then I can remove the strap that is holding the weight of the hub, and it's pretty straightforward. Now obviously at this point here there's a couple loose bolts and obviously the CV nut, axle nut, that will need to get torqued up to spec. So I'm going to put a screenshot on the screen now of what the torque specs are so that you can get them correct when you do this work. So the two lower ball joint to knuckle bolts need to be redone to 221 foot-pounds, which when converted to newton meters is the equivalent of 300 newton meters. So they require a fair bit of force. So with Jess in the car and her foot on the brake, I'm able to get enough tension to tighten the axle nut back up to spec. So that's to 249 foot-pounds, which is the equivalent of 338 newton meters. That's up to my side, yeah. So you can see here, if I rotate the locking nut, it blocks the hole. And then as I continue to rotate it, it blocks the hole. But then you'll get one where it fits in. So quite clear. So yeah, unlike a trailer wheel bearing, with your axle nut here, once it's torqued up to spec, you leave it there and you'll just rotate that locking castle nut like I showed you to get the right alignment for your cotter pin. Unlike a trailer bearing where you'll have to tighten or loosen the castle nut to get it to line up with the cotter pin, if that makes sense. With your locking nut and cotter pin or split pin reinstalled, you can then get your dust cover and your rubber mallet and gently just tap it back into place so that it is locked in. Obviously there was a little bit of oil that came out of the front diff just then. It's inevitable basically when you do that side that comes out of the diff. It's all pretty clean and it's in good condition, so I'm happy with that. I'm not going to change what's in there, but I will just top up a little bit with one of the nylon squeeze bags. So obviously there was a little bit of oil that ran down the side of the diff. I'm just cleaning that up now with a little bit of brake cleaner and letting the residue drop into my drip tray. Now, because the CV boot did split on this side, it had flicked out a bit of grease onto my suspension strut and lower control arm. So I took care and cleaned all that up as well whilst I was here, whilst it was all accessible and easy to get to before putting the wheel back on and finishing the job. So you may notice that I'm putting the wheel nuts on with my rattle gun. It's on the lowest setting, which is only about 90 newton meters. The torque spec for wheel nuts on my alloy wheels are 130 newton meters. So I will go back around with the torque wrench and torque them all up to spec. Not going to damage them with the rattle gun on its lowest setting. It doesn't have that much power. Well everyone, it is all buttoned up, it is all cleaned up, topped up the diff oil and tyres back on, all torqued to spec as you would have seen. So basically now it's all done. I'll take it for a quick test drive, but I don't envisage there being any issues whatsoever. So I hope you guys found the video useful, especially if you got a 200 series. Make sure you carry that 39 millimeter 12-point socket to do the CV axle nut. But if you've got another four-wheel drive that's IFS, basically the principle's very, very similar. And as a result, you basically be able to take this video. You might maybe need different tools. I would envisage that you do, but yeah, the principle's the same. So, like I said, I hope those with cruisers and those with other four-wheel drives found the video beneficial and helpful. I'm keen to do more videos like this. So if you have found it useful, if you have enjoyed it, make sure you drop us a comment so that way I can sort of see the interest in me producing more videos like this. Anyway, you guys all know the deal. Happy, safe adventuring. Stay safe on the tracks and trails. If we don't see you out there one day, we will see you in the next video. Cheers.